It's the Brad and John Show.
You know what, John? Sometimes it's frustrating. I have an attractive woman yesterday that came up to me on the street, and she walked right up to me, and she looked at me, and she smiled, and she said,
"What would you do with a brain if you had one?"
I'm sorry, I couldn't resist.
Well, I think that it's a lot to assume, Brad, that the women in your life want you to speak or give your opinion on anything. I think you're pretty used to you just being eye candy, right?
Yeah, I wish that were the case. Okay.
Or maybe a pack mule.
Now, John, you're an expert at this kind of stuff. I'm going to give a compliment and a criticism to St. Louis Public Radio at the same time.
I can't wait, Brad. That's the first.
The compliment is that Sarah Fensky does such a good job when she does the Lawyers Roundtable. Okay, that's the compliment. My criticism is maybe I don't know what I'm doing, but why is it that St. Louis Public Radio, who gets millions and millions and millions of taxpayers' dollars, plus all these other people who they con into sending money to them for doing nothing, why is it that their player for their podcast sucks? You can't fast forward. You can't change the speeds. Have you ever done that on their website?
Yeah, Brad. And in fact, it must have been immediately prior to you and I doing the show together, if not during that period of time. I made quite a big deal about it, Brad. And you know, I love Jason Rosenbaum, but I would harangue him in a mostly good-natured way about the fact that it was virtually impossible to use their native, so to speak, their native podcast player on their website. It was just intolerable. And the only workaround would be I eventually just started linking to the Apple iTunes version because the native version of their player is horrific.
It just sucks. Now
it's abysmal. And Brett, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I made the exact same point that you did, which is just how can a station whose gimmick is radio, like radio is in your title, right? But you can't get the audio right.
Right. I mean, and look, I'm not, we have our deficiencies here at our station, but at least when you listen to our archive version, we have two ways of doing it. We have the bjshow.co, which is the traditional podcast, but you can go through on that player and you can, select, go to certain points in the playback. You can change the speeds and things like that. And what John does is on our bjshow.video, he actually bookmarks the various. He does a very good rundown if you go into people who use YouTube know what I'm talking about. Hit more and the thing opens up a bottom section and you can go look it up.
Description, yeah, it's in the description.
In the description, okay. And he's got all the timestamps and stuff like that. But see, okay, the reason is yesterday I listened to the podcast or whatever it was on the playback on their station where they were talking about KDHX. But what was interesting was, and we'll get to KDHX in a minute, right before the KDHX thing, they talked about Bob McCulloch's son who shot the gun off at the Halloween celebration. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. And so that just came to a resolution within the last month, right? Right.
The story is, wasn't it a Halloween celebration someplace?
It was a trunk or treat. I believe it was at an elementary school in Kirkwood proper, I think, right? Or at least the Kirkwood School District.
Right. And of course, we all know that nothing bad ever happens in Kirkwood.
Right. It only happens across the street in Meacham Park.
Right. There's nothing ever bad in Kirkwood because talk to anybody. Oh, Kirkwood's so safe. Nothing ever happens.
What did they say about it on the show, Brad?
The story is, and can I just synopsize this and you can correct me if I'm right or wrong. Okay. At the time, he was a St. Louis County police officer. Wasn't that the case?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. He shows up at this trunk or treat. And
who is he, Brad? For people who don't know who Bob McCulloch is.
Bob McCulloch is the former prosecuting attorney for St. Louis County, who quite honestly thought he was going to be there for life, and along comes this guy by the name of Wesley Bell, who sort of upsets the apple cart. And matter of fact, Bob, who was on autopilot, thought he didn't really have to campaign anymore, and he lost the election. I think everybody was sort of shocked by that. Oh my God, Bob lost the election. But anyway, his son shows up at this trunk or treat, and he's a St. Louis County police officer, and he's carrying, and for some crazy reason, he pulls out his gun and fires in the air several rounds and yells, "Everybody's going to die." So everybody went like, what the hell is this? And a couple 911 calls were issued, if John Combest would have been there, none of the calls would have been originated by
never
John.
called 911. Absolutely not. I would have gotten in my car and been on my way, secured the safety of my kids, and leave 911 to people like Brad Hildebrand.
Right. People who care, as opposed to John who doesn't care.
Yeah. There's always going to be a one-eyed gimp in the crowd that'll call 911.
Thanks, John. You're always so kind to me. So he gets arrested, and it goes to trial. And this was interesting. If you don't know what the lawyers' roundtable is, it rotates around. And Sarah Fenske has 3 attorneys in the studio, and she throws these cases out. And so it's almost like it's almost like, John. It's hold on.
I know what it's almost like. Play the Eminem cover, Brad.
No, it's almost like.
What would John do? What would John do?
It's almost like that. It almost like Sarah Fenske throws out thing through 3 attorneys, and she asks them what their opinion, what they would have done, stuff like that. Okay. The interesting part of this story is he got like 7 years of probation, but the prosecutor was recommending 3 years in prison. And the reason the judge picked 7 years probation as opposed to 3 years of incarceration, he probably would have only served like, a year or 18 months, that they were afraid to put him in jail because his father had put many of those same criminals in jail, and they thought that he would not last, or at least he'd have the snot beat out of him in jail or possibly even killed because of the fact that people would say, well, you're McCulloch's kid. What's the reason I'm in here is because you're dead.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? So
they didn't give him 7 years. So I can see this, but I guess I have a problem with this because this comes down to the situation if it would have been you and I, who our father was not the former prosecutor in St. Louis County, we'd be in jail for 3 years. Get what I'm saying?
I do, but I don't think we should punish Mr. McCulloch for the fact that his dad was a successful prosecutor and put a bunch of savages behind bars, right?
So you're saying you're okay with the 7-year probation?
Yeah, absolutely. Why would you put him in a place where he's going to get shanked because his old man did his job?
Yeah, but, you do the crime, you do the time, right? No?
Yeah, but if part of the thing is, well, this guy is getting special treatment because of his dad. Yeah, well, his dad put a bunch of criminals behind bars.
Couldn't they have
And also, listen, I didn't listen to the legal roundtable thing because if I want to hear 3 liberals talking to another wonderful liberal woman like Sarah Fenske, if I want to hear 4 liberals, I'll just turn on NPR any given time of day and hear a bunch of liberals talking liberal stuff.
I listened because I wanted to hear the KDHX thing. And what's interesting about this is...
I bet you did. Let me finish real quick, though, Brad. The McCulloch thing is, it sounds like, from what I remember reading about the story, there was something about, I'm guessing his ex-wife was there, and there was some sort of I'm guessing he got mad about something. Now, Brad, again, this goes back to the A block and the idea of impulse control. And you've done your story many times about the first thing they teach you in gun is don't use your gun and all this other stuff. That's not the point. The point is having the impulse control of not making a scene no matter how mad you are or how angry you are at somebody. And I also think that it's clear that this guy probably needs a lot of help. I would assume he needs a lot of mental health help.
Well, they talked about it in the show that he now has a felony conviction. So obviously, he's never going to be a police officer again. So he's going to have to find a different line of work because you can't. Well, maybe you can someplace. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, you could be a security guard, or you could work in the city of St. Louis under Tashara. Probably.
I guess you could, or you could be one of Cory Bush's bodyguards or something like that. Because
Now, Brad, did you have your daily KDHX update? Did something new happen there?
Okay, they threw out the case, and what's sort of interesting about this is. And I've said all along, I'm not an expert in bankruptcy law. Unfortunately, been on the receiving end of bankruptcy, as opposed to a person who shall remain nameless, who has told people in St. Charles County I've gone bankrupt 2 times, which is not true. I have never declared bankruptcy personally or any of my businesses. So screw you, butthead. But that's a whole other story.
Okay, there we go. I like it.
So they talked about that this is sort of cut and dried with bankruptcy court, that there's a trustee appointed, and the trustee's job essentially is to satisfy the creditors and then move on. And the story behind this is, and they brought up the fact that the creditors are probably going to be taken care of 100%, which is very unusual, like I talked about, and there's going to be money left over. And they brought up an interesting point. The point they brought up was, they said that one of the things they thought was sad about this is the digital divide. And the angle was This is over-the-air, OTA, over-the-air broadcasting, which doesn't really cost you anything to listen. Everybody's probably got access to a radio in their car or a clock radio in their house or something like that. As opposed to the fact that nowadays, if you want to stream, you got to have an internet account, you got to have a phone or, a computer, and you got to pay more per month for your streaming and blah, 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 blah. And they talked about that. But the interesting aspect of this was that the state case was filed first, and the state case revolves around the fact that the board essentially dismissed the associate members who were the DJs, and the associate members got a limited vote when it came to voting on things. And right before they took the vote to go bankrupt, they dismissed all the associate members except for one. There had to be some reason for one of them staying. And they're saying that could be an interesting aspect of the law, because if the attorneys plead this properly, they could say, yep, this thing's in bankruptcy court and it's moving down the rails and it's probably going to end up with the K-Love people or the Joy 99 people. But they could say that if they could prove the case that the board purposely got rid of all the associate members to essentially stack the vote for bankruptcy, then they say there is a chance for the KDHX people, or the love of KDHX, let me try that again, the love of KDHX people to prevail. So it's sort of an interesting thing. And none of them were bankruptcy attorneys, but they said this is probably an interesting aspect of this. The sad part is, once again, I'm the cynic in this. This is going to end up with either K-Love or Joy 99, and it's just going to be, if it's K-Love, it's just going to be the same crap that I shouldn't say crap. It's the same stuff that they broadcast all over the country. And the only local aspect of the station, K-Love does, they do the top of the hour ID. And for those of you...
And Brad, you've mentioned before, wasn't it you that said that the great thing about this for local stations is get your behind in gear, or else a larger, more successful company will come in and take the station off your hands. Isn't that what you said, Brad?
No.
Didn't you say that survival of the fittest is great in radio?
No, I did not say that. And by the way...
okay, that was me.
By the way, I got another... Here we go again. I'm not a Facebook Messenger person. If you want to contact me, I give my phone number out all the time. 314-280-8880. John, is that my real phone number?
It is. It sure is. Sadly, you give your real number out over the air.
That is my number. You can text me. You can call me. I get one of the KBDZ jocks who this the other day, who did this on Messenger. I don't check Messenger that often, maybe every week or something like that. And here's one of the KBDZ jocks, Kevy Kev. And it's interesting, when I go to his Facebook page, it says, guess where he says he lives? Remember
the Westplex.
Oh, no. Remember, this is a local radio station that's claiming they're local, which I thought they were, but it says...
Florida. Does he live in Florida?
It says he lives in Sydney, Australia. Okay.
Now, is he joking or is he being serious?
I think he does live in Sydney, Australia.
Now, Brett, for folks who don't know, we had a strenuous story at the end of last week. It turned around. You had a great conversation with the general manager of KBDZ. And are you about to tell me that a disc jockey now turned heel and is criticizing you about something after the general manager praises you?
Okay, John, let me go to my Messenger page and I will read it.
Because this is like, to quote an astronaut named Katy Perry, it's like they're hot and they're cold. They're yes and they're no. They're in and they're out. They're up and they're down.
I love your analogies, John, to quote Kevy.
Thank you.
Okay. Kev, K-E-V-Y-K-E-V, Russell, okay? And this is what he sends. This is last week. He sends, I'm just curious as to why you are posting part of our media kit on your Facebook page. I'm going like, I'm trying to help you guys.
And what did I say to you, Brad? And you shared my private message with some other people. What did I say to you at the time?
Eat, poop, and die. Is that what you said?
No, I said that it was magnanimous of you. And I said that you tried to do something nice and then people question your motives, right?
So I replied, I believe in promoting local radio, and you're a local radio. As the tide rises, so do all boats. Why are you KBDC folks so curious as to why I would promote another radio station? Call me sometime and we can discuss. 314-280-8880.
Now, hold on, Brad. Didn't you, and you also texted him last week, but didn't you say that you actually had a nice conversation on the phone?
No, this is a different guy. This is Kevy Kev. This is the guy.
Well, you just said Kevy Kev Russell.
That's what it says is on his Facebook. Kevy Kev
Oh,
Russell.
okay. I thought Russell was the guy that had contacted you. That was the general manager.
No, his name is what does I say? Is Dennis Russell or something like that?
Yeah. Okay. So there's two guys named Russell. You can see why it's a little confusing.
Kevin Russell is the general manager's name. Kevy Kev Russell and
And who's Kevy Kev the DJ? You're saying that's not the general manager.
I don't know. It says he lives in Sydney, Australia.
Do
I
you
don't
know
who
who you talked to on the phone, or was it some Indian guy pretending to be an American? Like, I'm lost here.
This whole thing just mystifies me.
Yeah, so you either talked to the general manager on the phone or you didn't.
I talked to this guy who's Kevin Russell. Maybe it's the same guy. I don't know.
Okay, so that would be, or maybe he's got a split personality. Like, help me understand here, Brad. Because where you had left it was that this guy actually understood what you were doing and appreciated. And for the last few days, you've talked about how he's where his favorite station. I couldn't tell if you were sarcastic or not.
John, I'm telling you, I don't understand it. I don't get it either. I mean, here, I'm going to go right now. I'm on Facebook. I'm going to go right here. I'm going to go on Facebook. I'm going to show you. And maybe this is a joke. I don't really know. But if I want to Kevy Kev Russell. And it says, lives in Sydney, Australia. Okay, that's what it says right here. Lives in Sydney, Australia. 58 mutual friends, including Sean Balint. I don't understand the whole thing. I'll never understand this crazy thing. And it's the same thing the problem I got in with Tracy Ellis. I tried to help Tracy. I will tell you, the last meeting I ever had with Tracy Ellis, where her husband accused me of being untrustworthy because why, John? Why am I untrustworthy?
Because you were a radio guy.
Because I'm a radio person. And I said to him, well, aren't you and your wife trying to be radio people? We're not going to be like the rest of the radio people. They're like going to float above us. You know, we're the rest of the radio people. I mean, I guess they're so religious. They're like in heaven floating above us. And the rest of the radio people, like myself, are down here in hell. And we're like, yeah.
At least in purgatory.
Yes,
so what I love is the fact that maybe we don't know who you actually spoke to on the phone from KBDZ. And now, Brad, this would be a time that if you made up that conversation, if you didn't actually talk to this guy, this would be a good time to come clean about it.
I talked to him. Or else
do you know who you spoke with on the phone that day?
I talked to the guy.
But how? And then he's coming back now. You never got around to what the latest message is on Facebook Messenger.
That was it.
But didn't he send that? Isn't that his original message from last week?
No. He sent me a text last week. He sent me.
Okay, and then so maybe is he a guy that's your age that has no short-term memory because he's riddled with dementia?
John, here's the deal. Okay, I one time Steve Kasper, who's no longer with us, died. I had a meeting with Steve Kasper, and I was doing him a favor. If I told you what the favor was, I was going to show him how he was going to, and this is sort of a bizarre story, and I can back this up. If you want to talk off air about this, I'll tell you the whole story behind this.
You've told it to me before multiple times. Go ahead.
No, I've never told you this part of the story.
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to tell him how he could file some forms with the state of Missouri and get thousands of dollars in money back from the state of Missouri because he is a broadcaster. Have I ever told you this part of the story? You've never heard this part of the story, have you? I told him I was going to do this. And I told him, I said, look, all I want is just do me a favor, maybe send me a little, money, send me like a finder's fee, stuff like that, whatever it was. And he got why should I do that? And I go, dude, I'm going to tell you how you're going to get. And in this case with him, maybe it could have been 5 figures. We're talking over $10,000 refund from the state of Missouri, which he didn't know about. We have the special little deal with broadcasters that a lot of broadcasters don't know about. And he, once again, you got to understand that Steve Kasper is always the smartest man in the room. If we're Steve Kasper and Einstein, Steve would say, well, I'm the smartest man here. That's the way
So
Steve
the
Kasper
point
was.
is that he did not appreciate what you were doing for him, and he probably even questioned your motives, Brad.
And I said to him, Steve, here's the difference between you and I. I believe as the tide rises, so do all boats. You believe that, or at least you hope that as the tide rises, your boat floats and everybody else's boat sinks. And he says, you're exactly right. I have a real problem with people like that. I just don't understand that because of the fact that would look at the business model. That would be the business model of, like, let's say if Sam Walton were still alive and he's got his big store down in Chesterfield Valley, and one day he walked out in the parking lot and he says, I want my store to prosper and all the other stores down here in Chesterfield Valley, I want them to go out of business. Because Sam, being a smart business person, would know that when people come to Chesterfield Valley, maybe to go to his store, but they're going to go to the other stores as well, too. Or vice versa, if they go to Best Buy and they look, oh, there's a Walmart right down the parking lot, I need to pick up some toothpaste. So the angle is everybody prospers, right? Get what I'm saying?
Everybody does. And, Brad, that's the trailer. You just gave a great trailer for your new movie called Steve Kasper, The Unfriendly Ghost. It was just picked up by Disney. Brad, can I tell you something positive? My favorite part when you pulled the KBDZ promo that you did and posted it on YouTube, which was awesome.
Yes.
And for folks who haven't heard it, it's about 7 minutes long.
Yes.
The average view duration is a little over 1 minute and 30 seconds, which is about as long as people can listen to Brad without hitting the X button. Brad, my favorite part about you linked to the KBDZ station, didn't you?
I did.
I know, and my favorite part about that link, Brad.
I linked to Katy Kruze's page.
You did, yeah.
Yes.
I thought that was great. I think it goes to show that, like, okay, there's KBDZ, and then there's this gal, Katy Kruze.
And Katy Kruze is one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. I mean, she's just so nice. She's so down to earth. And what's interesting about it is, not only is she a very nice woman, she's an attractive woman, and she is a rocker to her core. I mean,
Brad, I looked up her picture and was like, oh, okay, all right.
She lives years ago when she was on the Dave Glover station, when they still had, she was on K-Hits 96.3 before they blew up K-Hits. They changed it into something else. And she did a shift right before, she was on middays, and Glover would come on at 3 or 4, and they would have her on as guest. And years ago, they had her on numerous times, pre and post-operative. She had an operation. You know what the operation was?
Was it a reduction of some sort?
An increase. And she was very proud of the fact that she had a boob job.
And now you mean of her nose, of her proboscis, right?
No, of her boobs. She had a boob job, and she talked about. It was interesting. I've never heard a woman talk about a boob job like this, because she talked about the reason she wanted to do this, and she talked about some of her friends were for it, some of her friends were against it, and they talked about this for weeks. They talked about it for a couple weeks before she had the boob job, and obviously she was gone for 3 or 4 or 5 days, and then she came back and they interviewed her, and subsequently, like over the course of like couple 2-3 months, she talked about how her life had changed. It was really interesting.
Yeah, I bet it had changed, right?
Okay, we didn't get to the dog story.
I know, actually, but as I always tell you, Brad, thanks for the memories.
John. Okay, we'll talk about my run-in with the pet lovers next break, okay?